Hi, welcome to Matters of the Heart and Soul. I'm your host, Janie Charlot. Matters of the Heart and Soul is a podcast to raise awareness and awaken humanity to all that is within. We want to be a beacon of light on your life journey. Hi, welcome to Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast. I'm your host, Janie Charlot, and I am co-hosting with Mr. Russell Bruce today.
Hey, Janie and everybody out there in listening land.
All right, so on today's podcast, we are talking about state of consciousness and raising our consciousness. So consciousness, if we want to define it in its simplest term, it is just the awareness of the internal and or external existence. For centuries, a lot of analysis and scientists and philosophers have tried to define consciousness. And it has always been known as a mystique or something very hard to define, but we are realizing that consciousness is really a state of awareness. So we're going to try to break that down as best we can with the level of consciousness that we are currently at right now. So let's get started.
Yeah, so looking at the state of the world today, I guess consciousness would be a good topic for us to discuss. With COVID-19 quarantine going on, a lot of people are isolated and forced actually to be into deep thought and to raise their conscious awareness, because we have to figure out, first of all, what's going on and, pretty much how do I protect myself and my loved ones during this time, right? So historically, and biblically, all the arrows are pointing to this time in which we live, where this great change would take place. And according to the ancient Mayan calendar, this is that time when consciously we're supposed to go through this golden age awakening period, like it was back during the pyramid building ages. So right now it's interesting because I do see a lot of people waking up consciously. A lot of that over the last 25 years or so, with the internet and everything coming out and information exchanging hands like rapidly. Like, they say our great grandparents, we're making decisions now like in minutes that it once took them like maybe months to make, because of the way information had to travel, like horse and buggy, and then even with the advent airplanes it sped up, but we literally could now like send a message across the world in seconds. So consciousness is increasing because of things of that nature, but we'll delve into the difference between collective consciousness and individual consciousness, and whether it's your consciousness or somebody else trying to tell you what to think.
Yeah, and I think if as far as the individual and collective, I think as an individual, you are a part of the whole. So it's so important that individually we work each and every day to expand our level of consciousness, so that collectively, within your family or within your community, you are contributing to that raise in consciousness. So if we kind of go back to the definition, that consciousness in its simplest term is being aware of your existence, internal, external. And so with so much going on, if you're working every day, you coming home, the TV is on, the radio is on, you may have 2 or 3 kids in the house, you may not know what are my thoughts versus what are their thoughts. So I know it's very important, in order to raise consciousness, is to first of all become aware of your own thoughts, to become aware of your own being, your own vibrational energy. And a lot of times I like to do that by riding in a car with no radio, no music, just there in my thoughts, and I'm able to kind of get in touch with my own energy and my own vibration. So first of all, that's just becoming aware of your existence. Because if we are all energy, then we need to become aware of what energy we hold individually. Because it can become very blurred when you have a very busy life. You're on the go, you're going here, going there, doing this, doing that, and you're doing it not just for yourself, but for everybody else around you. So you don't often know what is your own energy that you're carrying. And so the best way to do that is to quiet yourself. And I don't think you could do that for a couple hours. I think you have to consistently do it, 30 minutes to an hour every day, I would say, for the minimum of a month, so that you can kind of figure out what is it that you carry, what is the existence within yourself.
That's a very good point. Yeah, and I try to do pretty much the same. I watch very limited television. Like, even through this whole COVID experience, I'm lucky if I've watched, say, maybe 2 hours of television, especially the news. But going back to like what you were saying, like taking that time out every day to pray and meditate, to get that quiet time, to get in touch with your thoughts and your connection to the Creator, and not just getting information, say, from CNN or Fox or something like that, because these they're companies, they're in business to make a profit. So, and a lot of them have sponsors, like different segments, and the majority of them happen to be sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. So that makes it kind of tricky as to what they can say, and it makes you really wonder if you're really getting the truth or not. So consciously, you have to make a decision to either get alternative media sources to provide information so that you can balance it out and make a conscious decision, versus a slanted decision where you're being swayed one way or the other.
So, okay, so that's, at least that's being aware, first of all, of where your level of consciousness is. I also like to say that consciousness is also a programming, and sometimes you have to unprogram or unlearn things that you were taught. So if we kind of think of a newborn baby who is new into this world, and that baby is often programmed according to the culture and the beliefs and the morals and the traditions of the family that baby was born into, and that could also program a consciousness.
Very much so. Very much so. And sometimes for the good, and sometimes in some dysfunctional households it may be a negative thing.
Right. And if we just take a household, for example, children sometimes won't raise above the level of consciousness of their parents, because the parents are the teachers and the molders of those children. So a child will oftentimes, that's why, at the age of 18, kids move out, they kind of start to explore this world with new lens and new eyes, because they've been under the consciousness of their parents
and their tribe, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whether it's
in their community,
their
yeah,
siblings,
exactly.
their neighborhood,
yeah, everything. So we also kind of want to talk about raising consciousness, and how to do that.
Exactly. So, and a lot of it is subconscious programming, right? So, like you were saying, when you're driving into work, or at home, having the television shut off, or if you decide to turn it on, you're gonna watch something that's gonna feed your spirit in a positive nature. Like, for example, the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's fake. So, like, for example, you could be watching a horror film, and all of a sudden you're tensed up, you have shortness of breath, you know, your brain starts to release cortisol into the body as if you're actually having the experience. So your body's actually being traumatized as if you're experiencing something that's not even really happening. So it's like understanding that, you know, the conscious mind can be fed something more positive by programming the subconscious mind to, like, for example,
to then make it
exactly.
consciously, yeah.
I like watching documentaries on things that are going to educate me, something that I could use moving forward in life. Like today I post what's the health, where they kind of dissect like what foods are good and which ones are bad and why, and the pros and cons of all of it, right? Things of that nature I feel help to feed me uh, in a physical sense and ultimately in a spiritual sense, because you know they kind of work hand in hand, right? Music, you could program, you know, the type of music that you put into your brain. Like working out, I like to listen to something a little bit more hardcore, put me in warrior mode, because it's me against the weights or against the treadmill or the track or whatever. But you know, in the quiet time, I like to listen to things that are more soothing, like love music or even jazz. You know, I go through periods where I listen to jazz, things of that nature, to where they're more soothing to the soul and kind of stimulate and spark thought on things such as love and, you know, hope and inspiration.
So then what are some things that can hinder raising your consciousness?
I think by not shutting out the outside noise, you know, and by allowing all the outside influences influence your decisions. Like like right now, we're dealing with this crisis, with the COVID crisis, and there are so many different aspects of this thing and information coming from everywhere. So if it's somebody who, the typical Democrat, watches CNN because it feeds into their collective ideology on how this thing is supposed to operate, so to speak. And, you know, the Republican watches Fox. So it's like, is it really your opinion or is it their opinion
That's being
that's
programmed.
being programmed into your mindset?
That's a good insight.
Whereas I'm not going to say it's right or wrong. It's not for me, but it's like I would also kind of counterbalance that by going out seeking alternative information from people who oppose those ideas, or listen to both of them or whatever, and then formulate the opinion based upon all of the information and all the different angles, right? Because, like, for example, if 10 people are there, they're witnessing a car accident, and from different angles, they're all going to see something different.
Exactly.
And,
That's
you know,
true.
the only way to get the truth is to listen to everybody and then kind of formulate a consensus based upon, you know, what makes
The
sense.
information, yeah, that makes sense. And so we're talking about raising our consciousness, and you know, I believe the ultimate consciousness is a God consciousness that you want to reach.
Very true.
You know, that's my personal opinion, and I believe that consciousness is having a consciousness of love and compassion and a oneness for everything and everyone on this earth. So that's the ultimate goal. So, and if we're talking about how to raise it, you know, you have to understand some of the things that could be barriers to getting to that God consciousness, right? So racism, sexism, classism, just worldly things that, you know, we're dealing with, and we're dealing with it because it's real, but we also have to be consciously aware of, is this programming?
Exactly. Yeah, and it even goes back to, say, even politics. Like I said, it's like you have Democrat, Republican, two different wings, same bird, but it's like at the end of the day, I like to say that I'm independent, but I'm for the truth and what's right and best for the greater good of humanity.
Well, exactly. So if we really went about life that way, for example, if we truly went about life as the ultimate consciousness is the God consciousness, then there would really be no separation between political parties, because again, that's a barrier. That's another material barrier in consciousness, because it is placing you, or it's forcing you to think a certain way, because this group or this collective, this group of individuals are all thinking one way, and you're being trained subconsciously, because it's little things like you said on the news and the articles and everything is being slighted for you to think one way. And let's not even say politics. We could, I mean, it's in everything.
Religion.
It's religion, it's different
Race.
sexes,
It's
race,
all of
is in so many things that we are being trained subconsciously to think a certain way, and you have to be conscious of it. So when you start to turn your television off, and you turn your radio off, and you take some time away from, social platforms, and you really sit with yourself, then you really start to understand, where are these thoughts coming from? Are these my thoughts, or are these opinions of other people that were
Right.
given to me?
And I think the more time that you spend alone and start to tap into that higher source, like through meditation or just being out in nature, like just sitting out listening to the birds and the wind blow through the trees, things of that nature, or even like when I'm flying, like just being above the clouds, or just say flying out west and seeing the expansive landmass that's being just useless. Like there's nothing out there, and you'll see like this one house in the middle of nowhere. Things of that nature. You're like,
And I think that's how we can win. I think that's how we can win as individuals and as a collective and communities.
yeah. So it's like just realizing actually, and I was saying all that just to say that you start to realize that you're more than just your physical self, that you're more than just, you know, male versus female, or rich, poor, or black, white, or Asian, or whatever. It's like you start to realize that there's something inside of you that's bigger than you, and that conscious awareness of it makes it more expansive when you realize that you're a energetic being within this physical spacesuit. Like we are spiritual beings having a physical experience that we call life, that in some cases may last on an average of 75 years or whatever that they say in this consciousness, if you buy into that, right? So it's once you realize that you're more than that, now your thought process is more expansive, right? So it's like you can't stay stuck in your physical reality and and not grow, because a lot of things, illness, everything, it all starts in the spiritual mental realm before it becomes physical.
Let me ask you this, Russell. Um, there has to be a point in raising our consciousness, right? There has to truly be a point that's going to serve us, because otherwise, why do this? Why put in the work? Why do that for yourself? So how can the world be changed? By raising your consciousness. How can we fight injustices? How can we make our families better? How can this just be a better place for us? And how can we change it for the next generation? By raising our consciousness.
I think Michael Jackson said it best. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. It has to change, starting with self. I think that too many times we try to change everything and everybody instead of changing ourselves. You have a lot of people that go out and try to conquer outer space before they conquer themselves. I think that individually, I think if we, dig deeper to raise our consciousness in a physical sense, whether it's cultural base, race base, or whatever, to understand that we all come from the same physical beings that just migrated throughout the globe. So there's really only one race here. We may come in different shapes, sizes, colors, etc., and live in different geographical places across the globe, but it's like we all contribute and offer something special to this world, right? And
What's the one race?
the human race. And the whole thing is that's from a physical sense, but we are all here to experience this world not only just from a physical standpoint, but from a spiritual standpoint, because when this is all said and done, based upon the research that energy spirit body lives on.
Well, what about, like we've mentioned this before, what about the people that says, well, I'll worry about when I die, I'll worry about that physical part, that spiritual part then. How can raising the level of consciousness help here physically?
So from a physical standpoint, like I said, it's if it doesn't happen spiritually, it's not gonna happen physically. So you have, like, let's just use the civil rights movement in the 60s, because that was probably one of the most powerful physical conscious movements in recent past, right? So you had a situation where people were fed up with injustices, and a lot of times if we look at it, black people in America were kind of at the forefront, but many people benefited from it. Women ended up getting the right to vote. Black people gained, the right to vote, and to eat in restaurants, things that really are God given that, we're fighting men for, which really makes no sense to me in the long run. But, and the fact that it happened in my lifetime is even more, it's more real, because it's not something that happened in the distant past, like 100, 200 years ago. This is very recent, where, people didn't have like the simple right to vote or drink out of a water fountain.
Yeah. And spiritual consciousness, like I mentioned earlier, I think the ultimate is getting to that God consciousness. So how can that benefit the world, a rise in spiritual consciousness?
Well, I think for those who reach deeper, and there's a big difference to me between religion and spirituality, right? So
Well, that's a consciousness in itself.
yeah,
I think, because
right.
when and in a certain way, consciousness is also a new way of thinking. It's breaking down old patterns, old paradigms, old ways of thinking. So it's coming to that realization, since we're talking about religion, that hey, I won't go to hell if I don't go to church every Sunday.
Well, once again, there's a difference to me, because religion comes with a set of beliefs that are in this box, right?
Well, yes.
So it's like,
that keeps you in a box.
If this box says you have to do this, that, and that to get that, then these people tend to judge each other or themselves based upon those tools, and that mine is right and yours is wrong, and things of that nature. Whereas from a spiritual standpoint, it's like I can love and respect and honor people's differences, but it's like, and I'm not gonna say one is right or one is wrong. I just look at them as different philosophies to try to reach the same goal. Like, I think I used this before. Like, if heaven was downtown and I'm coming from,
Oh, as far as
from the
religion.
west, I'm gonna take 20 east to get downtown. Somebody else is taking 75 north. Somebody else is taking 85 south or whatever to get to the same place. I don't get confused with the direction that they're taking to get there. I'm looking at the end goal. If we're trying to bring heaven on earth, and that's what it's going to take for you to reach that level of spirituality. If your religion is going to help you get there, then cool. But I like pure spirituality, like taking all the religious dogmas out of the way. No secret handshakes, none of that. I commune directly to the Creator, God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it. And I think by trying to raise my spiritual consciousness and understanding my connectivity to the Creator and allowing the Creator to use me for the greater betterment of not only myself, but for everybody I come in contact, that it would spill out into the world. And I think what happens is a person that reaches that level, however they get there, I think what happens is fear begins to dissipate. They become more bold in their approach to life and things of that nature, and also standing up against injustices. Like somebody like Gandhi or Martin Luther King, who stood up against powerful governments, knowing that, the ultimate goal is probably going to be to lose your life in order to see this thing through. They lost all fear and were willing to go ahead and put it all on the line for it. So that's how I can see spirituality, and that's kind of an ultimate sense or a martyr type sense of the example. But I think if people are raising their consciousness, that it's going to force them to live and be a little bit more bold in their approach toward life. And if it is more connected to Creator versus wicked things, I think we reach a tipping point where, it doesn't take everybody on the planet waking up and raising their consciousness. There's a certain number of people who reach it. People are very faddish. So it's like, even if they didn't totally understand or believe in the philosophy or whatever, they'll catch on to those things that they find common and support the effort.
Okay. And what are some things that I just lost my train of thought.
Well, I could expound on what we're already talking about. So, like consciousness now, right? In our current situation with COVID, we're living in a time in history that the consciousness level of the earth is increasing. So they say that the earth is going, say, from like a third dimension to a fourth and fifth dimension, like into this new age, right? Or this new time period, is because the earth is traveling throughout the galaxy, right? And the earth is actually a living organism and we are on it. So therefore we have to increase our vibration in order to pretty much stay on it. You know what I mean? So, we have a period right now where global warming is a big debate out there, right? It's real, it exists. Now, whether it's all carbon emissions and all that, that's the whole political argument. But it's here. And the thing is, it's cyclical in nature, right? So, we're on this 25,920 year cycle, and every time we get to this period, this golden age, the earth heats up.
I knew what I wanted to say now.
Right, so that heats up. So consciousness is going to rise, but the thing is, the wicked people who want to maintain control and dominance over the people, they also know that it's time. So that's why today we live in such confusion, because it's like, it's the matrix. It's really the matrix. And I think if people dig deeper, there were books written like George Orwell's book, 1984, things of that nature. All of these books were talking about a time when, you know, these people would try to dominate and control masses of people. And, there would be a rebellious nature in man because their consciousness levels would arise.
Mm-hmm. What are let's talk about some things when you know that you're having a raise in your consciousness.
Like some of the things that may occur.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Like I just off the top of my head is like some things you just no longer interest you. Some people that you used to hang out with, friends, like you no longer have those things in common with them anymore.
yeah. So
It's like a deeper
true,
meaning of life and
true. So it's like when your consciousness and awareness expands, it's like, say for example, something as simple as diet, right? You start to understand that different foods have different electric or energy values in them. Like fruits and vegetables tend to have higher vibrations than meats and dead carbs, things of that nature, right? And you begin to eat more fruits and vegetables, and you just start to see your skin clears up, your waistline starts to go down, things of that nature. It's like incrementally over a period of time, you'll start to see that these subtle changes are creating physical changes within the body, right? So, also, reading books, listening to lectures and sermons and, things of that nature, when you're feeding your soul over a period of time, there's certain conversations that you're not going to want to have anymore. And there's certain people, if they're just strictly negative and never have any positive words to say or whatever, you're going to find yourself not wanting to be in their company because you're no longer wanting to lower your vibration down to be around these type of people, because you feel that you're going to have to lose what you gain just to be in their presence, and you're going to realize that it's not worth it, because at the end of the day, it's your mission. It's not their mission. It's your mission.
Yeah. And I think the goal is to keep raising your vibration and level of consciousness. And I think that it's totally okay to be in a situation where you can acknowledge somebody else's level of consciousness if it is not as high as your own. You can acknowledge that, and you could help that person raise theirs without lowering yours. And I think that's important. Like, that's probably the biggest thing to understand and to get while you're, expanding your consciousness and stuff like that, is to be able to operate and communicate with others in a way that you can recognize and be compassionate, but you don't have to lower yours at any point.
Very true. And it comes into a situation where, you could talk to people instead of at them, and offer constructive criticism, things of that nature, instead of just being blunt and harsh and trying to destroy them. We see some people who have taken over social media with their harsh, tone of voice or whatever, even though they may have, some knowledge that where they actually know better, but knowing better and doing better are two different things.
Yeah. I think if you keep in mind that the highest vibration is a God consciousness, and God consciousness resides in compassion and love, and if you try to embody that, or work on all those parts every day, and expanding and getting to that point in life that this life will serve you so much better.
Very true.
Yeah. Anything else?
Can't think of anything else. I think we covered it.
Yeah. So this has been another episode of Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast. We just finished having a small discussion on raising your consciousness, and exactly what that is and how you can get the best out of life by doing that. Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast is inspired by love, God, relationships, spirituality, justice, culture, family, children, finances, freedom, personal growth, energy and vibrations, universal principles, health, education, the masculine and feminine energy, music, and all things of the heart and soul. We appreciate your support, and please stay tuned for our next episode.